Hello there, everybody, and welcome to our review of Obi-Wan Kenobi Episode 5. We will be talking full spoilers here about the latest episode of Obi-Wan Kenobi, but before we do so, please like the video down below, subscribe to the channel for continued Obi-Wan Kenobi coverage. We do predictions and speculation as well as episode reviews of every episode of Obi-Wan Kenobi. So this coming Friday, we will be talking about Episode 6, the finale of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Predictions and speculation for the finale will be up on Friday. If you haven't checked out our reviews for the other videos, the other episodes of Obi-Wan Kenobi, episodes 1 through 4 are up on the channel. There's an Obi-Wan Kenobi playlist. Check all of that stuff out. So now to get into our review of this episode, I think you can tell by our faces that this is significantly better than last week, and very exciting. Such a great episode.
Yeah.
Right off the bat, I mean, just from the opening scene on, we have it. So let's talk about that opening scene right now. Obi-Wan, and we finally get to see Anakin, like not Anakin hooded standing 100 feet away, where you could barely even make out his face. This was Anakin, and it was before Attack of the Clones, and it was a little training sparring session between Anakin and Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan's got the mullet on Coruscant in the Jedi Temple. It was awesome. What did you think about that scene and just kind of that through line through the entire episode?
Yeah, I don't think I'll ever get used to seeing like the shadows, the colored shadows of the lightsabers now. Been a little bit of an adjustment, I guess, being a prequel fan, just seeing these shadows. But especially seeing this in the Kenobi show, it's like we've been flooded with like blue and red, especially when we had that little Vader Kenobi encounter on Mapuzo. But seeing this here, like, oh man, like I loved seeing like the flashing lights on each other's faces. We're in what almost seems pretty similar to the Youngling opening scene of episode one, that same sort of location with open windows of sorts. I'm really enjoying seeing the landscapes of Coruscant. Obviously, this is not movie level CGI or graphics, but it's still better than what we got in 1999 to 2005. That's just how the technology works. So just seeing the prequels just reinvigorated just a little bit more, I love that personally. And I love the use of these flashback scene. Like when it cuts off so short and quickly, I'm like, no, that can't be it, right? But of course, they intercut it throughout the episode, and it really worked well as like a storytelling device. But just seeing Hayden as Anakin, that really warmed my heart. Like people were like, "Ah, is this just like Ewan doing a favor to Hayden? Be like, hi, if I'm back and I'm a producer, I want Hayden back." Like, no, like Hayden has been doing close-ups of Vader, and now he finally gets to be Anakin, which I love. Um, I'd always prefer a Clone Wars flashback, but I think that might be more appropriate for the Ahsoka show because that's really the more defining relationship there than Obi-Wan Anakin is. Um, but just seeing these two and seeing like this episode show the flaws of you know that relationship, the flaws of Anakin. Like, I mean, a big point that Obi-Wan says is, Anakin, you're a great warrior, but sometimes you just want to prove yourself too much. Like, I'm not saying word for word, but I just loved seeing the physicality of it. I love seeing that they both still got it, at the end of the day. My slight critique would be I wish at least Hayden was a little bit de-aged in the face. I can live with Ewan. There are some shots without the blue light on Hayden's face that looked like, yeah, he's in his 40s now. When they use the blue light, it seems like they could kind of hide it, kind of touch him up a little bit, and he looked fine there. But in a way, it works for me because it reminds me of like the Five Bloods movie where by Spike Lee that came out a couple years ago, where all these older actors play like their younger versions through their memories. Um, so I can kind of take this as like a little bit of like a memory hallucination, thinking back on sort of thing where maybe Obi-Wan and Anakin are both thinking back on, or at least Obi-Wan is thinking back on this one of many training sessions and kind of transposing how they would have looked like at that time period, but with their actual ages. So I can live with it. I wish Hayden looked a little bit more like he did in 2003, 2005. But other than that, just a superb opening scene that was perfectly cut up and used for the rest of the episode.
Yeah, I noticed that too with him looking a little old. I think especially because he's, we all thought with Clone Wars you could make him look a bit more like he would have in Revenge of the Sith, where he is almost a little aged up in a way from how old he actually is when they were filming the movie. Like he's battle hardened, he's got scars, he's got a little bit more age on his face. Where in Attack of the Clones, he's supposed to be 19, and this is before Attack of the Clones, so he's younger. So it's he's like early 19, maybe even 18. So yeah, that type of stuff definitely messes with the believability a little bit, but it still doesn't hamper any of the importance or the meaning or the enjoyment again seeing Hayden Christensen as Anakin again in a scene like this. And oh man, what an awesome scene, and the way they use it to not only just play thematically off of what Obi-Wan and Anakin are feeling throughout the episode, but also the way they are able to, get into each other's heads, the way Obi-Wan thinks he knows Anakin inside and out because of these sparring sessions, which he's had over and over again. He'd probably done this 150 times with Anakin over the 10 years that Anakin was his apprentice. And he knows the way he thinks. In the same way, Vader, we get a lot of shots of Vader post flashback, and you think he knows the way Obi-Wan thinks. It's a nice give and take there about each other remembering all the flaws that each other have, and their relationship was so close for so long. They were, it's such a great way to tie all of that together. I'm really happy they did that, and I think it played out super well ultimately with a lot of the scenes that followed up. And so I guess now we get into what the rest of the meat of the episode was, like the present day, the 9 BBY timeline of this episode of Obi-Wan Kenobi, which was mostly filled with the path being trapped in this hangar by Lola, who shut down the door, and Leia's in there trying to reopen the door. And then on the flip side, they're trying to make a stand against Reva and a bunch of stormtroopers who are trying to lure Obi-Wan and bring him out. So we have all that, and there's some nice action scenes. There's some well shot fight scenes with stormtroopers. There's the one thing too that struck me is stormtroopers traditionally couldn't hit anybody. Like I think the one shot they showed us them actually shooting somebody was they were like maybe a foot from the person. Yeah, they could not miss. Other than that, Obi-Wan either was doing a really good job deflecting everything that was shot at those people, but it was cool. They had some shields and stuff there. They were being more resourceful, like we've seen the rebels over the time. And I thought all that was great. But I think really the meat of this episode is tied to the Obi-Wan Vader / Anakin relationship, but also Reva. We finally get answers for Reva in this episode, and the answers were what a lot of us were all thinking. She is one of the Padawans or the younglings from the Jedi Temple when Anakin was slaughtering everybody. I like what they did with that. I think, and we get to see actually Anakin slaughter younglings, which was, definitely intense, and they try their best to kind of like make it less brutal than it is, but they even have a warning before, about a sensitive content warning before the episode, which was, I got really excited when I saw that. I was like, oh man, what are we going to do in this episode? And seeing that, and I also like the idea of her being actually getting stabbed by Anakin, but surviving because of her hatred. It's something I feel like people are going to pick that apart, and it's something that's happened in Star Wars so many times. That Darth Maul can get cut in half and survive because of his hatred. I feel like Reva could get stabbed, just like the Grand Inquisitor just got stabbed, and survive as well. We don't know what type of medical treatment or anything she had after, but I actually like that angle. I like how it comes full circle in this. We'll talk, I guess, at the end or in our predictions video about Reva's role in the next episode, but I really liked what they did with her in this episode. It was probably my favorite Reva episode so far. But what were your thoughts on the way they handled Reva and some of the big reveals they gave for that character?
Well, I'd like to point out, before all that, I think they used Jabeam really well. Like, there are limitations to the volume, and they really emphasize that it is a circular setup because the base is circular, the opening port is circular. So it seems like they were mixing a little bit of practicality and function all together with the story. And I appreciate that. I think that was a little ingenious to keep everything rounded off, because I think I've noticed a lot in Book of Boba Fett and sometimes in The Mandalorian, some of these straighter lines at the edges of the screen, just barely, you can see some distortion that they mostly clean up, but especially with like these fast moving scenes and all that, it doesn't work as well. But yeah, I think this was probably my second favorite use of the volume for just like a location. I would say still to this day, it'll be the Ahsoka episode. I don't remember exactly what the name of the planet that she's on when we see her in season 2 of Mando, but that was such a great setting. Here, we don't really get to spend as much time with the environment of Jabim, but I really just loved how it looked. I mean, it felt very tied into Legends, where it was one of the most devastating early Clone Wars battles. The whole planet was ravaged. Obi-Wan was missing for a while. Anakin like lived and thrived after trying to lead without his master, but also succumbing to his anger at times. Like, this was a planet that feels sufficiently ravaged, and if it was because of the Clone Wars, I love it even more. I love that little Legends connotation kind of being touched here in some way, at least visually. But yeah, talking about the meat of the story with Reva, and I mean, I was shocked to see, the slashings. I don't know if I would say I was excited after seeing that warning. I don't know if that's the appropriate word for me, but I was like, oh, we're going to step it up a notch. And I mean, from the first second, this whole episode was another level compared to everything we've seen so far. Um, I mean, Reva, I think, was a character that she's been doing things, and I can't blame the Moses. I can't blame the writing entirely so far. It's like, because the whole thing with her is that she knows who Anakin is. She knows Anakin is Vader. Like, she's had these secrets, and she's operating in a way that, she works within the system, even if she might not come off as like die hard as other Inquisitors and all that. And I think that was always very obvious. For some people, it might have not been, but I thought it felt very clear to me. And now we got our answers, and it's very clear that, yeah, she's a youngling. She was there when Anakin was slaughtering everybody. What I didn't realize is that, like, she sees it right in front of her, Anakin with the clones slashing the people, saying that she's got to cover herself up with the bodies. Like, that's truly horrifying. Like, and I know we've gotten Order 66 in a lot of ways, from especially more of a clone perspective and clone auxiliary perspective. Seeing like a kid, the slaughtering is always the nadir, the lowest point of Order 66. The Anakin, you know, ignites his lightsaber and kills everybody. But to have a kid who survives it, like, oh god, that's horrifying. And then seeing that visual, I was like, okay, yeah, like I can see why, she's kind of playing it both ways. And I think the way Obi-Wan describes her as a hunter, like she's trying to hunt Anakin slash Vader, yeah, like that makes a lot of sense to me. That she's waiting to pounce. She's gonna, watch and watch and watch, and the moment like a little slip up is there, she's gonna shoot. Right, she's gonna take her shot, and I think that makes a lot of sense for her decision making and all that. Like why she hesitates a little bit with Leia, because she's not. I don't want to say she's truly evil, but she's done evil things. But she's trying to like not completely succumb to just fifth brother propaganda, hatred, like everything that the Inquisitors and other dark side users of this time believe in. So a lot of her actions until this point made a lot of sense. Her backstory really was necessary, and I think, it wasn't too long. They delivered it. I mean, Deborah Chow delivered it quite well visually, and just with some tense moments between her and Obi-Wan during the negotiation and stuff like that. And I think the one thing I wasn't really expecting was Obi-Wan kind of placing the idea in her mind, like, hey, I know you want him. Like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Work with me here. Like, we can take him down. And she's like, you don't know what I've done or what I'll do. And like, that shows her darkness. But Obi-Wan plants just something that was too salivating for her. Is like, how, like, she's like, how will you, like, how will you know that, he won't anticipate this? Like, she's got respect for her boss essentially, and he's like, because he's going to be focused on me. And I mean, I thought that was just really well thought out. It planted the idea, and it maybe forced her hand a little bit, like she had to now, because Obi-Wan's here. She can use him as like a pawn and all that. But at the end of the day, she's the pawn in this, king match between Anakin, Vader, and Obi-Wan. So I thought how she was used here was amazing. And I enjoyed that she had her own fight sequence and she really got to showcase the double lightsaber, the spinning part of it. Like, okay, like she's pulling out a couple tricks here. And I'd say this is where the shaky cam of Deborah Chow's fighting style really worked for me. I think some of her shots when they're kind of just talking and standing still don't always work for me. But seeing like the fights in the hallways, Ned B's sacrifice, I just it was really good. Tala's sacrifice, oh, that was great. Um, Maybe not so great on like close-ups to when they're showing the third sister like ready to negotiate, but then it was perfect when it was her versus Vader. And man, Vader versus Reva, so good, so good. Because after all these flashbacks are intercut of Obi-Wan knowing Anakin inside out, getting away with it, seeing using a fake ship decoy to go away, like not only do we see Vader's power, right, just like we do in Rebels, like, I love that part, but then seeing Vader just refusing to use his own lightsaber against the third sister, I thought was like so sassy. It was so Anakin, so sassy. Like he was just using the Force, deflecting, moving, turn around. He's still a big lumbering guy, but there's a little bit of agility here that I really appreciated that they used. And then splitting up the lightsaber, didn't think he could do that. That was really great. Throwing it on the ground for her to fetch and be like, "All right, come on, let me see what you got." And then using the Force pull it back and it was so good. I really loved that. And then just to top it all off, just seeing Grand Inquisitor's smug face as he walks in, he's like, "Oh, look how you've fallen, Grand Inquisitor." And he's like, "Revenge, keeps people alive." I just love Rupert Fried, like kind of playing it almost hammy with how the Grand Inquisitor is. But there's gonna be so many memes of Grand Inquisitor in this episode. I just know it. It was great. Every element worked. Rebels fans, our show is safe. Don't worry about it. Like this is everything worked so well for me in this episode.
Yeah, that was the last, I think, piece of this whole episode I wanted to touch on was the Darth Vader stuff. And Darth Vader he might not have as much dialogue in this episode as Reva or Obi-Wan, but he is probably the third main character in this episode. And he's got a lot of screen time, a lot of close-ups, a lot of shots of him thinking, reminiscing, plotting. But really, it is that last scene when he goes in there and he's just pushing those doors, opening all of them up, just charging forward at Obi-Wan. One track mind, just like Reva. She has a one track mind. All she can think about is getting Anakin. And that's all Vader can think about is getting Obi-Wan. When he grabs that ship and then pulls it down, and then just starts ripping all the panels off of it and just throwing them.
It was
And
insane.
that was just crazy. That's something you would see in like Force Unleashed, like a video game that just it doesn't feel like anyone that should have this much power. But if someone did, it would be Darth Vader. And he's just absolutely unhinged in that scene. And then to top it all up, Obi-Wan outthinks him again and flies off in a ship behind him. And it's just like going back again to Anakin. Just all he cares about is the victory. All he thinks about is he just has to deal with his target and he can't think beyond that situation. And Obi-Wan once again outsmarts him and they get away. And I thought that worked so well. And then, yes, like you were saying, the lightsaber duel with Reva and Vader. We've had Vader come into Star Wars material a lot since Disney's been around, whether it's been Rebels or even in novels like Lords of the Sith or in the show Rogue One. And in all of them, every time we all doubt Disney, or at least a lot of people do, and they're like, well, Vader can't, lose to, they're going to make him lose to Reva, or they're going to make him lose to Kanan and pop these other characters. No, they've done a great job every time, and he absolutely whoops Reva. Doesn't even want to use his own lightsaber against her, grabs her with the Force. And then one of the things I love to just top it all off, after he beats her multiple times with her own lightsaber, he does the same move that Obi-Wan does to him in the Jedi Temple, and he grabs her lightsaber out of her hand and then grabs the one he threw at her. and he's got them both, and then he stabs her, and it's so good. That whole sequence is fantastic. And the
Yeah,
Grand Inquisitor.
it's so good. It's so good. Yeah. No, go ahead. Go. You're saying Grand
No,
Inquisitor.
the
Yeah.
Grand Inquisitor on top of it. I'm just glad. I like the way they reintroduced it. I like that Vader is, even though he is monstrous in this episode, and even though we do keep harping on Anakin just being all force, no thought, really, he has seen through Reva's lies, and he's seen through it enough to at least, maybe he didn't see through it completely, but he's talked to the Grand Inquisitor, and now they're there to just share an evil laugh at her expense as she's like dying on the floor. But the Grand Inquisitor is back, and I like the way they reintroduced him. I feel like he's mostly done for this show. Like, I don't think he has a big role to play in what ultimately will be the Anakin and Obi-Wan conflict. But I think the way they've used him, and the way he looks too, again, darker scene. I think every time except on Tatooine, he's looked really solid because you can see a bit more of the definition and more of the makeup and stuff. I thought it was all really well played. I like the end quite a bit
Yeah.
for this episode.
Yeah. I'd say just as like a final thought on this. Yeah, like you said, Anakin was a slow learner. Is like a really key point in Attack of the Clones, and he quite literally says it to um, Dooku when they have their duel there. What I think is pretty interesting is that it feels like they're connecting that quote to the when I left you, I was but a learner, but now I'm a master of episode 4. It seems like they're doing a little bit of progression there where, Obi-Wan thinks that he's completely outsmarted Anakin here because he's used his weaknesses against him. And for the most part, he has. But like you said, he uses the same move that Obi-Wan uses. He, like, even some of those flashback scenes, he's looking at Obi-Wan like there's a frustration, but Anakin learns. And as Vader with 10 years, like, yeah, he's mulled over every single thing. I think even if he got blinded by his hatred for his episode 3 and episode 5 here, he's still strategizing and planning. He's still a general. I mean, look, this episode also really showed General Kenobi, and Reva is clearly not a general, so she's just setting like spawn point floods of these not clone troopers, stormtroopers, and making mistakes and running away, going forward, going back. She's just winning on sheer power like a droid army in that sense. And Obi-Wan did good enough to get them to escape. But I think Vader after this episode will be a little clear-headed, and yeah, I think this rematch of the century after seeing what they've done with just Vader spinning around Reva with the Force, just yeah, this fight with Obi-Wan is gonna be crazy. But I think we should transition to this final point of, yeah, we've had Leia kind of her role here is just to get the doors open. She frees Lola from her restraining bolt and whatnot. Um, Haja's here because, after being outed by an Inquisitor, you kind of can't really go anywhere. Not too many places will look and help you out. So he joins up here. It's always nice to see Kamal and Johnny being a funny sort of guy, but trying to do the right thing. But he drops Obi-Wan's little receiver, and that receiver had a pre-recorded message from Bill saying, like, your silence worries me, and I think I'm going to have to go help Owen and the boy, right? So as much as Bale has harped on saying, like, Obi-Wan, your responsibility is to the boy and the girl, Bale is not like being hypocritical here. He's saying, like, okay, well, if we failed here, as painful as that is for me, I will make sure that won't happen again with the boy, essentially. So I really like that setup. And Haja just drops the piece. It was kind of silly, but like, it wasn't bad by any means. It's a little damage too, but it gives enough information to Reva to use your hatred to survive, like the Grand Inquisitor says. And that message, I mean, we see young Luke at the very end. I mean, she's coming for him. To what degree, we're gonna have this happen? I don't know, but that's more for predictions. But are you excited to see Tatooine one more time in this next final episode?
I actually am, because I feel like Obi-Wan's story, as much as this has been a great side adventure with Obi-Wan's story kind of to me still belongs on Tatooine, and I think a lot of it needs to be tied back to Luke and his role as Luke's protector. And I'm actually very excited to see what happens in next episode. And we'll be talking about that as well as anything that Vader might do, Grand Inquisitor's role, Leia's role, Bail's role, Owen, Luke, all of that in our prediction speculation, which will be out Friday morning. So check that out on the channel. Predictions and speculation for Obi-Wan Kenobi episode 6. But that'll wrap up our review for Obi-Wan Kenobi episode 5. What did you think? Let us know down below in the comments. We always get back to all your comments. And if you haven't yet, please like the video and subscribe to our channel for more Star Wars content, including the look at the finale of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.